Welcome to Headline to Heartline. Every racetrack has a pit lane where the world slows just enough for truth to surface. Today we pause there together to look at Michael Schumacher, not through the roar of engines or the rush of headlines, but through the quiet space his story now occupies. In the past few days, a familiar wave of attention returned when Richard Hopkins, a former Formula One colleague who admired Schumacher deeply, shared a personal belief that we may never see Michael in public again. He was speaking from memory and emotion, not inside knowledge, but that single comment quickly turned into a string of headlines. It was repeated across the internet as if it were a formal update, even though Hopkins himself clearly said he has not been part of the small circle allowed to visit him. His words were heartfelt, yet once they entered the news cycle, they became something larger and sharper than he ever intended. So let's slow down here and understand what actually happened. Hopkins was interviewed about his time in Formula One, reflecting on the people who shaped the sport. When the conversation drifted to Schumacher, he spoke openly about how deeply the 2013 accident affected everyone who worked with him. He mentioned that, in his view, the absence of public appearances for more than a decade likely means the public may never see the seven-time world champion again. It was not a revelation. It was not a leak. It was the kind of honest, emotional reflection someone makes when they miss a friend and accept the reality that time changes everything. But the internet doesn't stop for nuance. Within hours, his reflective comment is turned into headlines that suggested he had visited Schumacher, spoken to doctors, or had access to private information. None of that is true. Hopkins himself clarified that he hasn't been inside the Schumacher home since long before the accident. He has no medical insight. He was not describing a recent visit. He was describing a feeling, one rooted in the long silence that surrounds Michael's condition. The news reports also implied that Hopkins was describing a current moment, as if he had just walked away from a bedside and decided to share what he saw. In reality, he was recalling memories from decades ago. He worked with Schumacher during his racing years, admired his precision and discipline, and spoke warmly about who he was as a teammate. That warmth was the entire foundation of his comment, yet by the time the quote reached social media, it was transformed into a supposed update about Schumacher's health. The gap between what he said and what was reported shows how easily a gentle reflection becomes a hard headline. And this tells us something about the current landscape of Formula One news. Fans are eager for anything related to Schumacher. Journalists know that his name still draws enormous attention. Platforms know that an emotional sentence can travel faster than a verified fact. So when someone like Hopkins speaks, even briefly, his words take on a weight he never intended them to carry. It is not malicious. It is simply the world we live in, where speed replaces accuracy and interpretation replaces context. What's most striking is how quickly people reacted. Many believe that a former colleague's guess was a definitive statement. Others felt sadness, believing it represented a new turning point. But none of it came from the Schumacher family, who remained the only reliable source on his condition. They have not changed their stance. They have not opened the door to new visitors. They have not provided updates. Their silence remains consistent, and that consistency should matter more than any reshaped headline. Like and subscribe to the channel to stay with me as we explore the stories behind the headlines. People who follow Formula One understand the value of focus. We know what it means to protect a driver from pressure during a crucial moment, to build a barrier between the noise outside and the performance inside. Schumacher lived his entire career with that level of concentration, and in a way, his family is carrying that same discipline now. They are shielding him from the noise, from the speculation, from the world's demand for answers. They are choosing privacy, not secrecy, preservation, not withdrawal, love, not distance. When we think of Michael Schumacher, we think of the seasons when he lifted the sport onto his shoulders, the rain-soaked races where he looked almost untouchable, and the championships that felt like chapters in a larger story about human possibility. That legacy is still shaping Formula One today. This year at Monza, in the Italian Grand Prix, Max Verstappen finally broke one of Schumacher's most famous records, the fastest race in Formula One history, a mark Michael set up the same circuit back in 2003. For more than 20 years, that record stood as a benchmark of pure speed, and it took a new generation, new cars, and a new champion to lower it down. Verstappen's win at Monza in 2025 was a reminder of how the sport evolves, how lap times fall, and how even legendary numbers can eventually be rewritten. And yet, even as new records fall, so many of Schumacher's achievements still stand untouched. His 5 consecutive world titles from 2000 to 2004 remain unique more than 2 decades later. His 72 victories with Ferrari still define what it means for a driver in a team to become one. His 77 fastest laps, his complete podium season in 2002, when he finished in the top 3 at every single race, these are not just statistics. They are a map of dominance that is still hard to imagine anyone fully matching. Verstappen's brilliance, Lewis Hamilton's era of success, and the new wave of talent only highlight how extraordinary Schumacher's peak really was. The fact that we are still comparing today's greats to his numbers, more than 20 years on, is a tribute in itself. So when we talk about Michael Schumacher now, it is not only about what we do not know regarding his condition, it is also, and perhaps more importantly, about what we do know and will never forget: the way he changed Ferrari, the way he redefined preparation and fitness, the way he set standards that the next generations are still chasing. The records that fall show how healthy the sport is. The records that remain show how high he raised the bar. Thank you for spending this time with me. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video before you go. And until next time, may we all remember that even in the fastest sport on earth, there is a pit lane where everything slows just enough for respect to take its place.